This is SpaceTime Series 27, Episode 124, for broadcast on the 14th of October 2024. Coming up on SpaceTime, it turns out galaxies are much, much bigger than we thought. The discovery of live microbes living inside 2 billion-year-old rocks. And the United Launch Alliance Vulcan spacecraft snatches victory out of the jaws of defeat. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime.
Welcome to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
A new study has concluded that galaxies are actually much, much bigger than what we thought they were. The key to their true size, apparently, lies in the amount of gas surrounding them, which it now appears extends far further into intergalactic space than previously thought. The findings, reported in the journal Nature Astronomy, are based on detailed measurements of the circumgalactic medium of a star-bursting galaxy located some 270 million light-years away. The observations, made using new deep space imaging techniques, were able to detect the cloud of gas glowing outside the galaxy 100,000 light-years into intergalactic space. Now, if this galaxy is typical, then our own galaxy, the Milky Way, is already interacting with our larger neighbouring galaxy Andromeda. Astronomers had previously figured the two wouldn't collide and merge for at least another 3.7 billion years. The study's lead author, Associate Professor Nicole Nielsen from Swinburne University, Astro 3D, and the University of Oklahoma, says it begs the question, where does a galaxy end and deep space begin? Now that seems like a simple question until you look more closely at the gas surrounding galaxies, known as the circumgalactic medium. It turns out this halo of gas surrounding the galactic disk accounts for about 70% of the total mass of the galaxy, excluding dark matter. But until now, it's always remained something of a mystery. In the past, astronomers have only been able to observe the gas by measuring the light from background objects. But that limits the picture of the cloud to a pencil-like beam through it. It doesn't give you a true sense of the sheer vastness involved. To envisage the true size of this gas cloud, the astronomers needed to consider all the galaxy's starlight. That's what you typically view as the galactic disk of the galaxy. In this case, it extended around 7,800 light-years from the galactic centre. What this current study did was observe the physical connection of hydrogen and oxygen from the centre of the galaxy far into space. And it clearly showed that as you went further from the centre of the galaxy, the physical conditions of this gas changed. Nielsen says, put simply, these are usually fuzzy boundaries, but in this case, the authors seem to have found a fairly clear boundary in this galaxy between its interstellar medium and its circumgalactic medium. The study observed stars ionizing gas with their photons within the galaxy. In the circumgalactic medium, the gas was being heated by something other than typical conditions inside stars. Now, this likely includes heating from the diffuse emissions of the collective galaxies in the universe and possibly some contribution due to shock fronts. And it's this change which provides some of the answers as to where a galaxy really ends. This study's adding another piece to the puzzle that's one of the big questions in astronomy and galactic evolution. How do galaxies evolve? How do they get their gas? How do they process that gas? And where does that gas eventually go? Nielsen says the circumgalactic medium plays a huge role in the cycling of that gas. So, being able to understand what it looks like around galaxies of different types, ones that are star-forming and those that are no longer star-forming, and those that are transitioning between the two, will allow astronomers to observe differences in this gas, and that might be driving the differences between the galaxies themselves.
It seems like with this gas that we observed around this particular galaxy, the ionized gas seems to actually be shocked at that boundary that we found in the surface brightness of this gas. And so, yeah, the physical conditions are changing. It's being ionized by the stars, and then it's being shocked at that boundary, and then beyond that it's being ionized by other galaxies instead.
This has to bring us to the cosmic web of the universe itself, the filaments and strands that contain the stars and galaxies and galaxy clusters and superclusters around vast voids, and this is all part of that mechanism.
Yep. Definitely. It's part of all those fuzzy boundaries between all the different things that make up that cosmic web.
And so how did you actually make this discovery?
So we used the 10-meter telescopes with a fairly new instrument called the Keck Cosmic Web Imager. It's aptly named. And so it's this very sensitive integral field spectrograph. So what it does is it takes basically an image or like a region of the sky, and it splits it up into different parts of the sky, and then it splits it up into the spectrum. So it spreads out the light, and it does it in a way that it can detect very faint glowing emission from very distant things. So we used it and we found glowing hydrogen and oxygen gas with temperatures of about 10 to the 5 Kelvin. And we saw it everywhere we looked, which was really exciting.
And you can use this to provide you with an insight into the structure of galaxies overall and how they interact with each other.
Yeah, so just understanding where all of that gas is and finding like where it's located, its distribution, its temperature, and its physical conditions, and how it connects to the galaxies themselves.
Were you able to determine what types of gas were involved, what the actual elemental composition is?
It's mostly hydrogen and oxygen, so it's ionized hydrogen and oxygen. Those are the only elements we were able to detect just because we were limited in what wavelengths we're able to observe. So the other elements that we might be able to observe are either too faint or they're not covered by the instrument at the time. But if we were to go back and observe this galaxy again with the same instrument, it's now got a much wider wavelength range. And so we'd get a little bit more information about, say, like sulfur and nitrogen as well, which we expect to be there as well.
Tell us about the galaxy itself. What's it called? Yeah. How far away is it?
Yeah, so the nickname we've given it is IRAS-08. So it's just a catalog name. The catalog is IRAS, and then it's 08 is part of the declination and RA in declination. But the galaxy itself, so it's 270 million light years away. So it's actually quite a close galaxy for most of the work that I tend to do with this gas. But it's quite small. So it's about 8,000 light years in radius, and it's a starbursting galaxy. So it's forming about 10 solar masses per year. In contrast, like the Milky Way is only forming one solar mass per year, so one star like our sun every year. And this galaxy was really exciting because we know it's forming stars, and we can see evidence of those stars ejecting lots of processed material out of the galaxy towards us as the observer. And then we also knew that there was a lot of neutral hydrogen outside of this galaxy and kind of this plume of gas that's kind of either coming off of the galaxy or falling onto the galaxy. So we thought maybe all of that neutral hydrogen, which is like 70% of the neutral hydrogen in the whole system itself, we thought that maybe that was falling onto the galaxy to provide fuel for that starburst and all those stars that are being formed. So yeah, we observed it to look for all of this ionized gas to see if we could see it also accreting onto the galaxy. And but yeah, this galaxy is quite an interesting one, and it's very beautiful in the Hubble Space Telescope imaging as well.
Is it very isolated, or has it got lots of galactic companions around it, satellite galaxies? Or
it does have a smaller companion I can tell you in kiloparsecs, it's about 60 kiloparsecs away, so twice as far as we observed the gas. This galaxy, this companion galaxy, is about a tenth of the mass, so it's quite a bit smaller. So it's not doing any really strong interacting just yet with the galaxy we observed. So the galaxy we observed still has its grand spiral arm structure, and there doesn't seem to be any clear evidence that it's being torn apart by the other galaxy yet. But otherwise, it seems to be fairly isolated.
And extrapolating that to our own Milky Way galaxy, you point out that it could mean that our interaction, let's be honest, our collision with Andromeda may already have started.
Yeah, I mean, this circumgalactic medium, all of this gas that's around galaxies, it extends out to hundreds of kiloparsecs, and Andromeda and the Milky Way are about 1,000 kiloparsecs away from each other. And so this gas is likely already starting to touch between the two galaxies and starting to interact and mix.
Over the next few thousand years, millions of years.
Oh, probably millions and billions.
3.5 to 4 billion years, okay. What will astronomers of the future be seeing as the gas from the two galaxies interacts more? Are we going to be seeing something like the heliopause, the shock front or something?
Oh, I imagine there might be some shock front a little bit maybe, but not sure actually. We haven't really studied this gas in this circumgalactic medium and how it interacts between galaxies very much yet. So we're not quite sure what it's going to look like at that boundary. But I imagine there might be some shock interaction here.
Is that sort of where this research will now head? What do you hope to do with it?
Yeah, so we found this boundary of this galaxy, and it's only one galaxy. And so what we hope to do is to do this for more galaxies that not only are similar, so they're also starbursting, just to see if our galaxy is special in some way, but also to look at galaxies that are not forming as many stars because their gaseous reservoirs might actually be quite different. And understanding what the circumgalactic medium looks like around these different galaxies will help us understand how galaxies evolve to go from these starbursting galaxies to something that's more red and dead and no longer forming stars and has used up all of its gas. So yeah, we've already obtained more observations with the Keck Cosmic Web Imager of other galaxies. They just need to be analyzed and put together, and hopefully we'll get some other galaxies that are not as star forming and start to really put together this picture of what this gas looks like around a wide variety of objects.
I guess because each galaxy has its own history, it's going to be very different for each galaxy. Our Milky Way, for example, we've got the Sagittarius Dwarf Galaxy ploughing through it. We've got two other galaxies, the Large and Small Magellanic Clouds, having their stars and gas being sucked into the Milky Way already through.
Definitely.
So all these interactions are going to be very individual for each galaxy.
Yep. And in fact, RS-08, the galaxy we studied, when I look at the Hubble Space Telescope imaging of it that I have and look very close to the galaxy, it looks like there's a very similar sort of very small dwarf galaxy that is plunging through it. And so, yeah, that probably influences a little bit of the results as well.
It's fascinating work. What does it tell you about the cosmic web?
Oh, that maybe the boundaries aren't as fuzzy as we thought. Yeah, the cosmic web, there's so much gas between galaxies that we just don't see when we take images with like Hubble Space Telescope or the James Webb Space Telescope. When we just take pictures, we're missing so much of the non-dark matter mass in the universe that we really just need to go deeper and fainter and really understand where all this material is. Because, I mean, like I said, it's hydrogen and oxygen gas that we've observed, and those are some of the building blocks of life. It makes water. So we need to understand where all of our elements are coming from. So normally when we observe this gas, the way we do it is we do it indirectly. Like I said, it's this very faint gas. And so we have to, normally we've done it for like the last, 40 years. We've done it by looking at it in absorption. So you use a bright background object like a quasar as a flashlight. And then we see this absorption from this gas, and it's only in this very small, like pencil beam sized region for a single galaxy. And so these new observations have kind of helped move the field forward pretty significantly, because now we're able to get basically thousands of these data points around galaxies. And so I'm really excited to see what other astronomers come up with their observations, as well as our new observations coming out as well. Because now we're able to map out all of this gas around a single galaxy. And like you said, every galaxy has its own history. And so if you're only getting one pinpoint of data from a galaxy, you're missing a whole host of history and detail that these new observations are hopefully going to be able to illuminate, kind of literally.
That's Associate Professor Nicole Nielsen from Swinburne University, Astro 3D, and the University of Oklahoma. This is SpaceTime. Still to come, live microbes discovered inside 2 billion-year-old rocks, and the United Launch Alliance's new vulcan-centaur-rocket has literally snatched victory out of the jaws of defeat, overcoming a faulty strap-on booster to successfully place its payload into orbit. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. Scientists have discovered pockets of microbes living within a sealed fracture in 2 billion-year-old rock. The rock was excavated from the Bushveld Igneous complex in South Africa, an area well known for its rich ore deposits. The findings, reported in the journal Microbial Ecology, found the sample to be the oldest examples of living microbes ever discovered. Scientists undertook infrared spectroscopy, electron microscopy, and fluorescent microscopy imaging to confirm that the microbes were indigenous to the ancient core sample and not simply caused by contamination during the retrieval and study process. Research on these microbes could help scientists better understand the very earliest evolutions of life, as well as the search for extraterrestrial life in similarly aged rocks, such as samples which hopefully will soon be brought back from Mars. It's fascinating when you think about it. Deep, deep inside the Earth lies something ancient and alive. Colonies of microbes living in rocks far beneath the surface, somehow managing to survive for thousands, even millions, or in this case, billions of years. Now, these tiny resilient organisms appear to live life at a slower pace, scarcely evolving over geological timespans, and so offering researchers a chance to literally look back in time. The study's lead author, Yohei Suzuki from the University of Tokyo, says the previous oldest geological layer in which living microorganisms have been found was a mere 100-million-year-old deposit beneath the ocean floor. The Bushveld Igneous complex is a rocky intrusion in northeastern South Africa, formed when magma slowly cooled below the Earth's surface. It covers an area of roughly 66,000 square kilometres. That's about the size of Ireland, and varies in thickness by up to 9 kilometres. It contains some of the richest ore deposits on Earth, including about 70% of the world's mined platinum. Due to the way it was formed and the minimal deformation or change occurring to it since then, the rock's believed to have provided a stable habitat for ancient microbial life, allowing it to continue to thrive until today. The authors obtained a 30-centimetre long rock core sample from about 15 metres below ground. The rock was then cut into thin slices and analysed, which is when the team discovered the living microbial cells densely packed into cracks in the rock. Any gaps near these cracks were clogged with clay, making it impossible for these organisms to leave or for other things to enter. By staining the DNA of these microbial cells and using infrared spectroscopy to look at the proteins in the microbes and surrounding clay, the authors could confirm that these microbes were both alive and not contaminated. This is SpaceTime. Still to come, the United Launch Alliance's new vulcan-centaur-rocket snatches victory out of the jaws of defeat. And later in the Science Report, we look at the 2024 Nobel Prizes for Science, which have just been awarded in Stockholm. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. The United Launch Alliance's new vulcan-centaur-rocket has managed to snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat, overcoming a faulty strap-on solid rocket booster to successfully place its payload into orbit. The mission from Space Launch Complex 41 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Base in Florida was the second of 2 certification test flights needed before the new Vulcan booster could be used to carry high-priority payloads for the National Reconnaissance Office.
In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, BE4 ignition, 2, 1, and liftoff of Vulcan Cert 2. For the second time and for the first time under the light of the rising sun, Vulcan has lifted off from Slick 41 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station.
All temperatures and pressures look good. Vehicle has begun its pitch and raw program. We have 2 good BE4, and we've ended the pitch program. Vulcan's now at 1.5 or 0.5 Mach. The BE4 is now throttling down in preparation for SRB burnout. And vehicle is past Mach 1. Vulcan is supersonic and maximum dynamic pressure.
However, during the launch, SRB number 1, one of 2 Northrop Grumman solid rocket boosters strapped onto the core stage, suffered an anomaly, limiting performance and affecting the balance of the rocket.
Coming up on SRB burnout. And we have indication of SRB burnout. Up next is SRB jettison. Body rates continue to look nominal, trending towards 0.
Standing by for SRB jettison. According to the timeline, it should have happened by now.
BE4 is now throttling down.
Amazingly, the Vulcan's 2 Blue Origin-built methane-burning BE4 engines and the remaining SRB managed to continue its climb to orbit, successfully compensating for the failure. The booster anomaly could be clearly seen in long-range tracking camera views as a shower of sparks and what looked like debris falling away from the SRB 37 seconds after liftoff. The problem appeared to originate near the nozzle at the base of the booster, the exhaust plume changing shape dramatically, but the Vulcan was able to compensate, continuing its climb to orbit. The strap-on boosters continued to burn out, but were jettisoned 20 seconds later than planned.
And we have
the
SRB
separation
jettison.
of those SRBs a little bit later than according to the planned timeline.
Mission managers say the trajectory was normal throughout the climb.
Next step we're anticipating here on the timeline is booster engine cutoff just before the 5-minute mark into flight. Excellent work from our tracking team this morning.
Continue to have 2 good engines. Body rates trending towards 0. And we're now about 1 minute to nominal eco. Vulcan is now 1/4 of its liftoff weight, and Vulcan is now passing the Kármán line.
With Vulcan now in space, we're about 30 seconds away from booster engine cutoff, or BECO.
And we've started boost phase shielddown on the second stage engine. And the BE4s are throttling to maintain a constant acceleration. And we've concluded our boost phase shielddown. And PU has gone to open loop. And we have BECO, booster engine cutoff. And we have Vulcan-Centaur separation. And pre-start on LH2 and LO2. And we have full thrust on the RL10. And bearing jettison has been indicated. And we've begun thermal loop conditioning on the RCS. And fixed angles on Centaur PU. Vehicle is now 123 miles in altitude, 345 miles downrange, and traveling at 10,000 miles per hour. And we're getting indications that booster performance was within expectations. RL10 continues to perform nominally, and we are partway through a 10.5-minute burn.
The mission, which carried a dummy payload, was originally slated to launch the first Sierra Space Dream Chaser winged spaceplane. Dream Chaser will eventually ferry supplies to the International Space Station. But delays during testing at NASA forced United Launch Alliance to use a substitute mass simulator loaded with extra flight data instrumentation, as well as a couple of technology demonstrator experiments designed to help enable future long-duration spaceflights. This latest launch follows Vulcan's flawless maiden flight back on January the 8th, which sent a lunar lander onto the Moon. The new Vulcan booster replaces the earlier Atlas V and Delta IV family of rockets. They date back to the early days of the US space program. The Delta IV has now been formally retired. However, United Launch still has 15 Atlas Vs in its inventory. One of the problems is the Atlas V uses the Russian-built RD-180 engines in its core stage, and with the West's boycott of Moscow following the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine, once those engines are all used up, there'll be no more. 8 of the remaining Atlas V rockets will be used to launch Amazon's new Kuiper internet satellites. A further 6 is slated to fly Boeing's trouble-plagued Starliner, that's once it's returned to flight status. They'll be used to transport crew to the International Space Station. And the remaining Atlas V is slated to carry a Viasat telecommunications satellite into space. This is SpaceTime. And time now for a brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with the Science Report. And of course, the big news in the past week has been the awarding of the 2024 Nobel Prizes for Science in Stockholm, Sweden. The Nobel Prize in Physics has been awarded to John Hopfield and Geoffrey Hinton for their work in developing the tools for understanding the neural networks that underpin artificial intelligence. Back in 1982, theoretical biologist Hopfield, who has a background in physics, came up with a network that described connections between virtual neurons as physical forces. It became known as associative memory. That's because it evokes the process of trying to remember a word or concept based on related information. Meanwhile, Hinton, a computer scientist, later used principles from statistical physics, which are used to collectively describe systems made up of too many parts to track individually, to further develop Hopefield's work. These artificial neural networks were different from other types of computation because they learned from examples, including from complex data that would have been challenging for conventional software based on step-by-step calculations. The 2024 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine has been awarded to geneticists Victor Ambrose and Gary Ruvkun for their discovery of microRNA. This is a class of tiny RNA molecules that help control how genes are expressed in multicellular organisms. During the 1990s, the pair identified genes that encoded for microRNAs in roundworms. Now, for years, that discovery was considered just a quirk unique to roundworms. But the later discovery that microRNA is conserved across the tree of life caused this research field to explode. The Nobel Prize in Chemistry was split between computer scientist Demis Hassabis and theoretical chemist John Jumper. They won it for their work on the DeepMind artificial intelligence and the AI tool AlphaFold, which can predict the structure of nearly every artificial protein, in the process transforming biology. The pair share the prize with computational biophysicist David Baker, who led the development of the first protein with an entirely novel structure called Top7. His team are now redesigning proteins to do things like catalyzing specific chemical reactions by specifying the amino acids responsible for specific functions and letting the AI dream up the rest. A new study has found that two diametrically opposed personalities both enjoy magic tricks the most. First, there are skeptical rational folk, a category where most of our listeners fit into. We love magic tricks. And the second group are those who believe in superstitions and the paranormal. They love magic too. And it seems the rest, when it comes to magic tricks, I guess you'd call them muggles, can take it or leave it. Tim Mendham from Australian Skeptic says it's best to simply enjoy the magic. That's all that matters.
A lot of people like magic, right? But if someone did a survey, of course, scientists do, they can't keep their hands off anything. And they did a survey of the sort of people who like magic. Now, there was a number of people who don't like magic, and apparently they developed another paper that they wrote looking at the loathing of legerdemain, which is magic, sleight of hand. And of course, they chose that because it's LOL. Ha ha ha. Makes you wonder how serious the research is. But anyway, this particular study they did, it was quite scientific, and they looked at a lot of people, looked at their beliefs and their backgrounds and all that sort of stuff, and asked them if they like magic. And it turns out that there are two particular groups who really like magic, and one is the skeptical, rational folk, which is like me anyway. I don't know if it's like you.
I love magic, but I also like to know,
love magic too.
I love magic, but I'd like to know how the trick was done as well.
Yeah.
I find that just as fascinating.
Yeah, the other group that likes it are the superstitious and the paranormal. So you almost get extremes on the rationality front, although the superstitious would probably say they're rational as well. But yeah, there's a lot of people in between who are not that interested, but there's the two strongest groups based on their attitude towards magic. Now, the trouble is the skeptical, rational people would say that I enjoy magic and I want to know how it's done, right? The critical thinking, and they do their research or just try and figure it out on the spot. And the people who believe in paranormal, who might actually believe it's true, that magic is real. And most magicians will tell you they can make a lot more money if they pretended that what they were doing is real, as we know, and call themselves psychics or whatever, telekinesis, that sort of stuff, moving objects, sort of stuff that magicians do all the time. And magicians are therefore very good at debunking a lot of people with these particular claims, Uri Geller being a case in point for being debunked, and Houdini being a case in point of someone who'd like to go around and debunk them. So there are these two groups, but one of them is a believer in all the magic, and the other ones are saying, I want to know how it's done. The interesting thing is that when you get skeptics together and show a magic trick, they do come up with explanations for how a trick is done. And I've spoken with magicians about it, and they love it because they say that the skeptics come up with the most convoluted explanations, whereas the simplest explanation is the one which is most likely. It's a trick, it's a sleight of hand, it's distraction, it's all sorts of things like that, which are the techniques that magicians use. It's not something particularly hugely complicated, technological, etc., which is, you'd wonder if skeptics are trying to sort of say, I can't be fooled easily, therefore the reason must be complicated, whereas the paranormal and superstitious person would say, I can't be fooled easily, but this is so nice that it must be true. So they tend to believe it, that that's true, and the others sort of say, it's fun, but I don't know how it's done, but I'd like to figure out. And it's these two extremes that are looking at the way that the belief in magic.
That's Tim Mendham from Australian Skeptics. And that's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Pocket Casts, Spotify, Acast, Amazon Music, Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from spacetimewithstuartgary.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple-episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to spacetimewithstuartgary.com for full details. And if you want more space time, please check out our blog, where you'll find all the stuff we couldn't fit in the show, as well as heaps of images, news stories, loads of videos, and things on the web I find interesting or amusing. Just go to spacetimewithstuartgary.tumblr.com. That's all one word, and that's Tumblr without the E. You can also follow us through @StuartGary on Twitter, @SpaceTime with Stuart Gary on Instagram, through our SpaceTime YouTube channel, and on Facebook, just go to facebook.com/SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.